I want to reflect briefly on something that bothers me as a piano instructor that I've had to deal with since I started teaching many years ago. And that is this concept of the 30-minute lesson. I definitely wish more students would consider a longer lesson than 30 minutes because it's really hard to get into anything of any kind of depth in 30 minutes. Usually when you're studying piano, you have technique and sight reading and theory and multiple pieces, and you really need all of this to be successful, at least on the classical side of things. But if you're fitting all of this into 30 minutes, it basically means that you're only going surface level deep. In my lessons, I typically break things up for technique and then multiple pieces, and I try to cover theory as I go. Sometimes I have dedicated spaces for theory, but obviously it does depend on lesson length, and when I'm dealing with a 30-minute lesson, quite a lot gets cut. Also, quite a lot rests on the shoulder of the student because we just don't have time to cover everything. I know some teachers that don't even offer 30-minute lessons, so it's safe to assume that this can be a controversial topic in some circles. One thing I think students and teachers should consider is that typically students who are studying an instrument are only going to study that instrument for a portion of their life. Younger students will probably study throughout middle school and high school maybe, and then when they go off to college, they're done. And usually they may quit before they actually go off to college because preparing for college can be kind of difficult. With that said, the amount that student achieves in that amount of time is largely dependent on how long the lesson is and how serious they are. I also wanted to mention that there is a loss of efficiency when you're dealing with weekly 30-minute lessons compared to weekly 45s or longer. And this is because in a 30-minute lesson, you have time to see one thing in depth, maybe, and then you can briefly touch on a second concept before the lesson's pretty much wrapping up. So pretty much right when the lesson feels like it's getting going, it's time to end, and then we have to wait a week. And then we've forgotten a little bit of what we've learned, and so we have to kind of recall and repeat some stuff, and that's where the loss of efficiency is. As where if you have a longer lesson of any length longer, you can cover at least two things in depth. If you're a teacher or if you're a student and you're wondering when it's time to upgrade your lesson duration, I have a couple of indicators that I think may help you sort that out. The first indicator is if the student is waiting on the teacher to review pieces. Basically, if the student is going through pieces or exercises or whatever and preparing them in such a way that the teacher they don't really have time to review them all before the lesson's over. In this situation, the progress is actually limited by the length of the lesson. We're limited by what the teacher is able to get done in that amount of time, and the student is kind of blocked from achieving more because a good teacher is going to try to check everything. Another indicator that maybe a longer lesson is needed is if the student either struggles with understanding things or they have a lot of questions and they need to ask a lot of questions to really understand difficult concepts. Now you might ask, why do you teach 30-minute lessons if you don't really see them fitting in anywhere? And the answer to that is I teach 30-minute lessons because there are some situations where cost is a factor and it's either 30 minutes or no lesson. So of course, a lesson is superior to no lesson, and so you just have to get the cheapest thing that you can afford, and that's fair. And another situation where you might want to have a 30-minute lesson is if you have a particularly young student and they just don't have the attention span to sit there for more than 30 minutes. Another use for 30-minute lessons is for self-sufficient students who are not yet advanced pianists, who are really in the position of needing to just check in every now and then. They're mostly self-sufficient. They complete their assignments. They'll do whatever you ask, and they just need confirmation that they're on the right course. So I think for a while at least, you can get away with a 30-minute lesson and not necessarily hit that same inefficiency that I mentioned earlier. However, a 30-minute lesson is especially not a good situation for students that are really struggling with piano. I think the ideal length of time for most students is 45 minutes weekly if they are able to afford it and maintain, practice systematically. And I think for adult students, definitely outside of college and in the regular everyday life situation, I think that adults need 60 minutes, although they may not necessarily need to meet every week. One of the reasons I think that 45-minute lessons are the sweet spot for most people is because you have 3 15-minute blocks in the lesson. Of course, you can divide the lesson however you wish, but generally, if I'm going off of what we can do in 15 minutes, having an additional 15-minute block means that we can do an additional task. And if I'm working with a lot of technique or exercises in the first 15 minutes, then our piece is using up the other 15 minutes. So a 45-minute student can generally manage 2 pieces or more in that time frame, as where a 30-minute student is going to struggle to manage more than 1 piece at a time. Additionally, there are the added benefits of being able to spin longer on 1 piece whenever we need to, and I can really help a student learn and get established when they have a new piece. Generally, less lesson time means that we work on less in the lesson and we work on less overall, as where more time in the lesson means that we work on more in the lesson and we also work on more overall. So the assignments are bigger and we can cover more of the assignments in the lesson. In my opinion, it's a completely superior situation, and it is of greater benefit than just 50% more cost. If you are only studying music for a portion of your life, I think you should try to maximize what you can achieve in that time frame under a teacher's guidance and go for a longer lesson. I hope this video helps a student or a teacher out there, and I'll be back with more videos soon. Thanks for watching.